Welcome back to the 10th episode of how to build an RTS in Unity. In today's episode, we're going to be adding some quality of life changes to the gameplay loop and adding basic minimap functionality. So to start, let's select our heavy tank and go and attack some units. This looks pretty good so far, but the first thing that stands out is that the hit effect we added is a child of the tank. So it moves with the tank while it's turning. This looks a little strange. Let's see what we can do to remedy this. So let's open the project tab, click on scripts, and let's double click on the unit script. Now let's go to the top and find the hit effect. Right, just above the hit effect, let's type serialize field, private, transform, and let's call this hit effect parent. Then on start, let's type if hit effect parent not equal null, hit effect parent dot parent is null. This is simply going to put it into world space, and since it isn't playing, we don't really care where it is. We can hit save and go back into Unity. Now let's go to our heavy tank prefab. And in the inspector, we can take our hit effect and drop it right there. We can then go back and hit save. And before we test that out, I know that we're referencing the parent of the hit effect somewhere else. So let's right click on hit effect and go to find all references. Then we can double click here. And where it says hit effect.transform.parent, we can just simply say hit effect parent. And hit save, and we can go try that out. Okay, so we'll select our tank, and we'll go and attack this unit. And now when we turn, the hit effect stays in position. Great. So what we're now effectively doing is leaving the hit effect parent in world space and only keeping one instance of it per unit, so that we don't need to instantiate one each time there's a hit, meaning we also don't need to kill one after it's been used. Let's stop the game. Next, the camera angle doesn't really look that much like an RTS camera, so let's select the main camera and let's change this to something like 60. Then we can also set the upper limit to 100 so that we're able to raise it a little more, and let's bring it up slightly. Let's try that out. I think that looks a bit better. Great. Now let's decrease the tank's damage so that it doesn't kill units with one hit. So we'll select our heavy tank and let's change this to 50. Now we can go back to the game and we can hit play. Okay, so let's take our tank and we can attack this unit. And we can see splash damage is working, but the units aren't firing back. This is because they aren't currently in range. So let's go and see what we can do to fix that. We'll head back to our unit script. And let's move to the take damage method. Now, when we take damage, we're going to want to ensure that our unit fights back, but we're also going to want to look for any units nearby which could help us in the battle. So let's type private void, and let's call this request support from nearby units. Okay, in this method, we're going to do an overlap sphere to find any units within a radius around the unit that's getting attacked. So to start out, let's define a collider array. And let's call this hit colliders. And in here, we'll type physics dot overlap sphere. And we're going to do it from the unit's position. We'll define an arbitrary number here for now, let's say 20. And let's get our unit layer. It's called unit layer from the game manager script, because we only want to check for nearby units. And let's do a for loop of the hit colliders. And for each of these, let's do a try get. So we'll say if hit colliders I dot try get component out unit, let's say other unit. And then let's create another method, make it public void, and let's say handle request for backup. In here, we'll also want to take a selectable object, and we'll want to take in the aggressor. And what we'll do first is to make sure that we don't already have a target. So we'll say if current target is null, and we also don't want to be moving because we don't want to be interfering with someone who's received an instruction to go somewhere. So we'll say and is not moving. And then we'll set the target to the aggressor. Now we can call handle request, no, let's say other unit dot handle request for backup, and we'll pass in the aggressor. Okay, so we don't have the aggressor, so we'll want to take that in here as well. And now we can take this method and we'll call it if the unit is alive and he takes damage, then we'll pass in the aggressor. So let's hit save and give it a try. Select our tank and let's attack this unit over here. And now you can see not only does he respond, but his friends do too, even though they all end up dying. Great, this seems to work pretty well now. So now let's take 2 red tanks and let's test out a small battle. So we can go to the project tab. Under the heavy tank prefab, we'll take 2 red heavy tanks over here. And let's simulate a small battle. Let's take our blue tank and we can attack this guy over here, and we can get the red tank to attack him as well. Okay, so you can see this is not being destroyed. It's taking a little while and looks a bit strange, so let's go modify that. Go into our project tab, heavy tank, inspector, and here, destroy after seconds. So let's change this to, I don't know, 0.5, and let's try that out. So now we'll bring this guy down here. And let's attack this tank. Okay, it looks a little strange now, but we are making progress. That's because the death effect is actually a child of the unit being destroyed, so it's getting destroyed as well. So we can easily fix that by going into the editor, and let's scroll to the top and find our death effect, right click, find all references. And over here where it's getting played, right before it gets played, we can say death effect dot transform dot parent, and we'll set that to null. And that'll just make sure that it doesn't get affected by the parent dying. However, we will still want the death effect to get destroyed. So we can say destroy death effect, and we'll want to destroy that, let's say, after 3 seconds. You'll probably want to put this into a constant or something like that, but let's just go try it out. Okay, let's bring this guy forward, and we can attack this guy again. Let's see what happens. Much better. Okay, let's go and clean up our code. So we'll go back to the editor. And we want to place this 3 in a value, and we also want to go to the request support for backup method, and we'll remember that we put this here, which is the radius to check for supporting units. We want to put both of these in constants, or at least in variables we can adjust, just to make our code more maintainable. So let's go and do that. Let's set it right below the splash damage radius. So we'll do serialize field, private float, and let's say backup unit radius, something like that. And we'll put 20. And then over here where we have destroy after seconds, we'll say private float destroy death effect after seconds. And we can then go and set those values. So we'll head back to the quest support from nearby units method, and we'll just type radius and we'll get backup unit radius over here. And then our hit effect, not our hit effect, and then our death effect, which is under the die method. We'll reference this number here and we'll say destroy death effect after seconds. Okay, one of the last things we'll want to check is to make sure that on our moving range script that we keep removing any units who are no longer alive, because this won't automatically happen when they die, since on trigger exit will not fire. So all we need to do is bring up the fixed update method, and let's make another method and call this clean up units in moving range. And we're just going to do a for loop and say units in moving range dot count I plus plus, and all we'll do is check if that unit is alive, and if they're not, then we want to remove them. Now obviously we're going forward in our for loop, so this is going to fail, so we actually need to start it off at the end of the list like that, and then the condition will be that I is bigger than or equal to 0, and we'll reduce the I on each step. And then we can say units in moving range dot remove at I. So if you don't know much about for loops, when you are iterating through a list and you want to remove an element, it's always best to start at the end of the list so that you can go backward, because otherwise you're going to be referencing an element which doesn't actually exist if you remove it in the middle of the process. Okay, so we can now go and clean up and hit save. So all this is going to do is just remove any units who are no longer alive, so that we don't have units walking around thinking there are units in range which don't actually exist. Okay, let's give that one last try and then we can move on to the minimap. So let's take all our units and we can go and attack this guy here. And I think that looks pretty good. Of course, the support radius isn't that big. You can adjust it if you want to, and then that means anyone nearby, even in a bigger radius, will actually come and support that unit. Okay, I think this looks good. Let's take a look at the minimap. So to start, let's head over to our project tab and let's create a folder called UI. And over here we can right click, create, and let's create a custom render texture and we'll call this minimap texture. Okay, then we can right click on camera and we'll call this minimap camera. We'll set it to 0, 0, 0. Set this to 90 degrees. We can pull this camera up a bit. Put it there. Let's just put it above for now. We are going to change this to orthographic and let's increase the size, and we can pull it a bit left, a bit forward. That shouldn't really have an impact. And we can adjust this a little more. Just try to center it as much as possible. Okay, then we are going to go on target texture here, and we can select minimap texture, and that'll put our regular camera back. And we can right click over here, go UI, and let's go for a canvas, and we'll call this Minimap. And then we can go to the Minimap, we can right click, UI, and let's choose raw image, and we'll take our Minimap texture and drop it right there. Then we can go take a look at how this is looking. If we go to the 2D view, we can then take the raw image, and you can see there it is at the center of the screen. We'll probably want to make that a bit bigger. So firstly, let's go to our Minimap texture. Let's set this to 300 by 300, and then go to our raw image and set this to 300, 300. And we can just use our inspector to move it to the top right of the screen. And we'll probably want a border around that. So let's right click on our canvas, UI, and let's choose an image, and let's call this border. Let's copy the position and paste it. And let's select the source image as background. Then we can set this to 310 by 310, drag it above, and that'll give us a nice border. You can of course adjust the color of this if you like. So make it, I don't know, yellow or green, whatever you want. And let's go try that out. Okay, so you can see the units are moving around on here, which looks okay. But now we're going to want to make some changes. So let's go to our project tab, and let's go to our heavy tank, go to the base prefab, and let's right click over here, 3D object, and choose a sphere. And let's call this Minimap indicator. Go to the inspector, and let's go over here to layers, add layer, and let's create a layer for the Minimap. Then we can select this guy and put him on the Minimap layer. Then you're also going to want to make sure that you remove the collider. And then let's scale the sphere up so that it's roughly the size of the unit. And we'll want a material for this. So let's go to project, materials, and let's right click folder, and let's call this team colors. Then we can right click, go to material, blue, and red. Let's check these, make sure they actually are the colors they say they are. Put that back. And then we can drop blue onto the Minimap indicator there, or in your hierarchy. Okay, then we can go back, hit save, and let's go back to our heavy tank, and this will be done for all three of these, but we want to change the red one, so we'll double click on there, go to our materials, and let's drop red onto this one. Then we'll want to do the same for the SWAT guy, so let's go to our prefabs, SWAT guy, right click, 3D object, sphere, and we'll call this Minimap indicator. Make sure we remove the collider, and then we can go back to the materials, put on blue, go back, save, and let's open up the red variant under prefabs, collapse all of that, and let's take the red material and drop that there. Okay, now we can go back, hit save, and now we can see these are starting to show the positions, but we only want to render the objects that actually should be appearing on the minimap. So in order to do that, let's select our minimap camera, go to inspector. What we can do is to adjust the culling mask, and we want to render nothing except minimap and ground. Now what we can see is that the units are actually not appearing, and that's because we forgot to set the layer for these guys. So let's go back to our project tab, let's open the SWAT guy, and And over here, minimap indicator needs to be on the minimap layer. Hit back, save, and that looks much better. Then we'll want to go to our main camera, and over here, we'll adjust the culling mask to ignore the minimap. Good, looking much better. All right, let's test that out. So we'll hit play. And as you can see, the minimap's working quite well. And let's go have a battle so that we can see what happens on here. And as you can see, when the units die, they're removed from the minimap as well. Okay, something to consider is that any additional camera that you add is going to impact your performance. So we want to try to make it as efficient as possible without pre-optimizing too much. So some of the things that you can do is you could take a screenshot of your terrain from a high level, and instead of rendering the ground over here, you can actually just place an image as a background. And the other thing that you could do is instead of using spheres, you could use a more simple object like a cube, or even better would be to use a sprite. Of course, this being a tutorial, we aren't going to go too far into depth into the performance, but I do want to mention those because you might want to optimize those at a later point. The other thing we can see is that this isn't really lining up. So let's take our minimap camera and we can just adjust the position a little. Okay, as a last step, we're going to want to add a camera position indicator. So head over to the project tab, and we're going to want to import an image of a camera indicator. You will see I have attached one in the description of this video, so you can simply download that first. I'm going to right click, import new asset, and I'm going to get it from my RTS tutorial folder. You'll get it from your downloads folder. So we'll double click on the camera and select camera, change the texture type, and let's make that a sprite. Go apply. Okay, then let's take the minimap object and let's make it a child of HUD. And once you've done that, let's go to our scene view, and we can simply drag this and drop it into our scene. And we can F to focus on it. We'll want to rotate it, so let's put it at 90 degrees. And we'll want to make it a lot bigger. But before we do that, let's put it on the minimap layer. And let's scale it up, and you'll see it begins to appear there. You can scale it up as much as you like. I'll make it like that for now. And then you'll want to position it. But before we do that, let's actually drag it and make it a child of the main camera so that it moves with the camera. Probably bring it up a little like that. And I think that's okay for now. You maybe want to make it a little bigger. Now when we hit play, we can see that this moves with the camera. It is getting cut off on the edges, so to fix that I think we could probably just raise it so that it's actually above the terrain. Yeah, okay, so let's finish that. So we'll go here and let's raise it up. Since it's orthographic, we don't really care how high it is. So we'll play it again. Great. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm not going to go too deep into the minimap functionality for now, since we still have quite a bit of ground to cover for the rest of the series. But before we end, don't forget to check out my game Fungal Front on Steam and wishlist it or tell your friends about it. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.